Hi, my name is Tony Dong. 4 takeaways from Trump's Cuba speech. President Trump on Friday announced a handful of rollbacks to the previous administration's policy on Cuba. Surrounded by members of his administration and GOP lawmakers who have pushed for a harder line on the island nation, Trump said he was fulfilling a campaign promise to clamp down on Cuban President Raul Castro's government. "We will not lift sanctions on the Cuban regime until all political prisoners are freed, freedoms of assembly and expression are respected, all political parties are legalized, and free and internationally supervised elections are scheduled," Trump said. Castro is stepping down next year, marking the end of the family dynasty that ruled the country since the 1959 revolution. Trump also directed his administration to institute new restrictions on doing business with Cuban military entities and travel to Cuba by individuals. Here are 4 takeaways from Trump's big policy announcement. Trump put the emphasis on human rights. The Trump administration has taken some heat, even from Republicans, for its friendliness toward leaders of countries with questionable records on human rights. But Trump was unsparing in his criticisms of Cuba Friday, vowing to expose the crimes of the Castro regime and stand with the Cuban people in their struggle for freedom. "Because we know it is best for America to have freedom in our hemisphere, whether in Cuba or Venezuela, and to have a future where the people of each country can live out their own dreams," he said. The White House denied that the speech represented a shift for the administration. "I dispute that he has a lack of interest in human rights in other countries," Michael Anton, an NSC deputy assistant, told reporters on Air Force One. "It's true that the president approaches the question of human rights in different ways, depending on the relationship the United States has with a particular country. But in a twist, human rights groups who have been critical of Trump were less than thrilled with the new restrictions on Cuba. Isolating the nation, those groups say, ultimately hurts the Cuban people and empowers Castro. More travel, more communications access, and more dialogue with Cuba are the way forward for human rights in Cuba, Amnesty International said this week. "We called the Soviet Union the evil empire. All these things plus a strong investment in defense contributed to the demise in the Soviet Union," Mike Gonzalez, a Cuban-American and senior fellow at the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies, told The Hill. "It was by calling them out constantly and not giving an inch to their oppressors and repressors." Sen. Rubio took the spotlight. The White House ceded a share of the spotlight Friday to a surprising ally, Sen. Marco Rubio Avila. Rubio's appearance with Trump would have been hard to imagine a year ago, when the two men traded bitter barbs when running for president, including during an infamous debate exchange about genitalia. The White House pointed to Rubio, who also spoke before the president in Miami, as taking a central role in shaping the new policy. Rubio has long lobbied for a tougher stance on Cuba, and told The Hill he was pleased with Trump's targeted and specific changes, such as Trump's new prohibition on financial transactions with the Cuban military and security services. Rubio introduced similar legislation, the Cuban Military Transparency Act, in 2015. Thank you for watching. For the follow-up, subscribe to the channel yourself here. Former President Barack Obama was tapped last April to serve as the interim head of the Justice Department's National Security Division, which oversees the FBI's Russia investigation. Boant, who was briefly thrust into the no-2 spot at the Justice Department after Yates was fired, was also tasked with phoning Preet Bharara, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to deliver the unexpected news that he was fired. At the time, Boant also vowed to defend Trump's travel ban in the future. Boant is followed, on the succession list, by the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of North Carolina, John Stewart Bruce. and the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Texas, John Parker. Both are career prosecutors who are serving in their posts on an interim basis, until a presidential appointment is made. But they would not need to be Senate-confirmed to take over. It was not clear why the Trump administration chose those three U.S. attorneys to be in the succession line. During the Obama administration, sources familiar with the drafting of the old executive order said, the positions were chosen based on geographic diversity, and purposely included big cities where officials assumed there would be a talented attorney capable of stepping in. The U.S. attorneys on the succession list were from Washington, D.C., Chicago and Los Angeles. Some former Justice Department officials said they would find it inconceivable for Trump to clean house, or to fire Mueller, even taking into account the sometimes erratic behavior of the commander-in-chief. This president is so unpredictable, it's hard to say, says Emily Pierce, a former Justice Department official in the Obama administration. It would be the craziest thing he's done to date if he were to start firing the special counsel Rosenstein. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt that he realizes how much trouble he may be in, and that with the firing of Comey, he wouldn't do that. But others were less willing to predict the actions of a president who prides himself on being unpredictable. At the rate we're going, it's clearly possible, because you could go through a number of people in one go depending on the things that are asked of them, says Jane Chong, a national security and law associate at the Hoover Institution. If Rosenstein had refused to write a memo laying out the case for Comey's firing, you can imagine him being fired, and you can imagine Brand doing the same thing. It's not difficult to see a scenario like that playing out down the line, Chong said. In Washington circles, the comparison being made is between Trump's desire to rid himself of Mueller, at potentially any cost, and the Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate, in 1973, when the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General both resigned after refusing to obey President Richard Nixon's order to fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. It fell to the Solicitor General at the time, Robert Burke, to do the deed. I think the Watergate scenario would make most self-respecting lawyers loath to put themselves in the role that Burke ended up playing, said Brian Fallon, a former Obama Justice Department and Hillary Clinton spokesman. Most career-minded independent lawyers that have high regard for the Justice Department as an institution would be loath to be the modern-day equivalent to Burke. But Trump, too, is cognizant of the comparison to Nixon, according to one advisor. The president, who friends said does not enjoy living in Washington and is strained by the I think the Watergate scenario would make most self-respecting lawyers loath to put themselves in the role that Burke ended up playing, said Brian Fallon, a former Obama Justice Department and Hillary Clinton spokesman. Most career-minded independent lawyers that have high regard for the Justice Department as an institution would be loath to be the modern-day equivalent to Burke. But Trump, too, is cognizant of the comparison to Nixon, according to one advisor. The president, who friends said does not enjoy living in Washington and is strained by the demanding hours of the job, is motivated to carry on because he doesn't want to go down in history as a guy who tried and failed, said the advisor. He doesn't want to be the second president in history to resign. Thank you for watching. For the follow-up, subscribe to the channel yourself here.
Thank you for watching. For the follow-up, subscribe to the channel yourself here.